since I've been involved with this project for a very long time, I've been asked to make introductions and a few introductory remarks. And first I'd like to just say that you're welcome to this meeting. It's a joint meeting of the County of Marin and the Woodacre Flats Wastewater Group. And I'd like to start with some introductions. First of all, I'd like to thank Supervisor Rodoni for coming to the meeting, and he's here to listen to my explanation. Also from the county, we have Rebecca Ng from the Marin County Environmental Health Division. He's the Deputy Director of the Community Development Agency. He may be joining us later. And Lorene Jackson, who is the Project Manager and is in the county's Environmental Health Division. I'd also like to welcome Norm Hanshy, who many of you will remember from previous meetings. He's with Questa Engineering and has been of help to us throughout our efforts on this issue. I'd like to also ask the members of the Woodacre Flats Wastewater Group, which I'm just going to call the Wastewater Group from now on. Ask all of those folks to stand up. In addition, we have a couple of other members who are not here, but Anna Rick Sarman, Vita Rees, Liz Vial, Rich Schloman, Bruce Swick, Kristen Anderson, and we also have Jim Rollinson, who's not here this evening. Who am I missing? Catherine Wilkin with Maya over here as well. So, for nearly 12 years. I'll try to be really brief, but I do want to give you a little bit of history, and some of you will have heard this before, so part of you have heard it already. How did we get here tonight? It's a long story. In the late 1990s, concerns were rising about water quality in our creeks. And there was a terrible incident out in Tomales Bay where a bunch of people got sick after eating oysters that had been polluted with a human pathogen. As we moved into the early 2000s, water quality monitoring was happening, conducted by SPAWN and the Regional Water Quality Control Board, that indicated there really was human waste in our local creeks as well as in Tomales Bay. And then in the early 2000s came some things like the Endangered Species Act and the listing of trout salmon. And then to use an acronym that you should all know, the Tomales Bay pathogen TMDL, which means total maximum daily load, also documented pollutants in our creeks and identified the San Geronimo Valley as being one of the main sources, the second greatest source of E. coli and fecal coliform in the watershed. The TMDL was really focused on pathogens, also called for solutions, a whole array of solutions that included addressing failing septic systems in the San Geronimo Valley. In that same era, we had a program that was a free and anonymous program on the part of the county called Septic Matters, and many of you will remember it. It provided free and anonymous testing of septic systems throughout West Marin. People in the valley participated, and in Woodacre, a great percentage that were tested were shown to have substandard systems, a very high percentage. Then what I would just like to say is that the Tomales Bay Watershed Council was really grappling with all of these issues and received a $500,000 grant to study water quality issues and plan for them, identified the San Geronimo Valley as a problem, and in particular, the community of Woodacre. And at that time, I was an aide to Supervisor Kinsey, and I was serving on the Watershed Council, and the council turned to me and said, what would you do? You know, my first point was, we need to talk to the community. Out of that effort was convened the Woodacre group. So then it was just focused on Woodacre because that was the priority that the Watershed Council identified. The group began to educate itself, held community meetings, and in particular we learned about the community of Marshall, where many of you may know they had similar water quality issues, sewage in the bay. They worked together with the county over a period of a decade and put together a project that is now a resounding success, and which we feel as a group serves as a good model for our valley, that we can actually work together to address pollution and come up with a solution that is both economically better by working together, as well as dealing with the problems that exist. In addition, the community of Marshall was able to garner financing and low-interest loans, which helped the community members deal with this big hurdle of the cost and permitting of systems. So the community group, the wastewater group, worked with the county to undertake a study. We raised funds from the community members. In total, our community, Woodacre, funded $12,000 toward a study that was completed by Quest Engineering in 2011. That study is kind of the foundation for all of the work since, including this study. I won't go into that study too deeply, but there were 4 alternatives proposed. Lorene is going to go over those 4 alternatives. But one of them was a recycled wastewater treatment plant, which, while it was originally focused on Woodacre, we learned from Questa that that system could also be expanded to include more homes, potentially in San Geronimo or further in Upper Woodacre. At that point, the wastewater group, we all kind of looked at ourselves and said, isn't it better to help more people? The more homeowners that can be assisted, the better, we felt. In addition, we felt that the recycled option brought some other advantages that would be worthy of consideration: the recycled water, the ability to get grants to help homeowners pay for the work that needs to be done, and more. So we, in that time, decided to survey the community and see, surveying both San Geronimo and Woodacre, what the community felt about those options and whether it was worth it to stop and take the time and study the recycled option more. So we did do a survey of the community, and of the 180 that were surveyed, who submitted surveys, the service area included approximately 360 houses, roughly half responded, 180. Of that, 135 homeowners encouraged us to go forward to study the recycled wastewater option. I do want to just emphasize that this study tonight is only about one of the original 4 alternatives. All of the alternatives are still at play. This tonight is an opportunity for us to learn more about one of the alternatives. So that really is the focus of tonight's meeting. I'd like to also just take a moment for us to take a deep breath as a community. We've all been through a rough patch, is the way I would put it, in terms of the conflicts that happen in our community and disagreements. And I have no doubt, I know for a fact that this project is controversial, but I also want us to all remember that these conflicts come because we all care about our community so much. We care about its future. We may have different ideas about how that future should unfold, but I encourage us all to be respectful of each other in this meeting, to not interrupt each other and so on. But I also ask us to carry that same spirit of courtesy and respect out into the community after this meeting, and that when we characterize what has happened here, that we be careful about how we do it, that we treat each other as we would wish to be treated ourselves. With that note, I would like to hand it off to Lorene, who's going to guide us through a presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And if you can't hear me, raise your hand or something, and I'll try to speak louder. Okay. And keep reminding me. Oh, okay. It's all right. Okay, good. Don't want to shout too much. Anyway, I want to pick up on the project that we have today. It's funded by the State Water Resources Control Board. In 2016, we received a grant from the Water Recycling Program to do this feasibility study. And for those of you that were here 2 years ago, we had a draft report that we came up with a preferred alternative, and we starting the CEQA process on that preferred alternative as well as the other alternatives. And then, as you know, the golf course property went up for sale. We did a timeout. Then the county purchased the property. Then there's been litigation, and there's appeals, there's petitions. So we were just kind of stopping, and I apologize to the wastewater group because they've been wanting, like, we have an update, and we've been like, well, we're waiting. But the state graciously extended our grant. It was supposed to be due over a year ago, and they extended it to the end of this month. So we couldn't wait any longer. We needed to resume the discussion on what we're going to do with this problem that hasn't changed. And so that's what the crunch is. We came up with a report, and we wanted to present it to you folks. The purpose of the meeting is to present this information to you. No action will be taken. I don't expect you all to have read the report. None of you ever read them. I won't be offended. The executive summary is online as well as the full report. And the report is designed in the format to respond to the state grant. So there's a lot of stuff in there that is specific to the state grant. And that's why it's a little bit longer. But again, I want to underscore that there's no decisions that are going to be made tonight. This is the beginning of a conversation. We see this as a planning document. It's a document for the community to resume the conversation. It's a document for the planning process that's going to happen on the golf course property to use it as they see fit. It's information for them. And while the use of the golf course property is uncertain, we've revised the report, I believe, to account for a variety of uses. It's pretty flexible. There are a lot of opportunities with the wastewater recycling alternative. And while we recognize that, the Lee family, they were committed to the project and they saw a lot of inherent values. And while the property owners have changed, the inherent value of the wastewater recycling option hasn't changed. It provides an opportunity to update the wastewater system on the golf course property, and it provides a source of water for irrigation for that property for a variety of uses. So with that, that's, again, the intent of this meeting tonight is for information only. No action will be taken. And I want to clarify what this meeting is not. It's not a discussion of what should happen on the golf course property. We're not talking about the best use of that property, and I'm going to steer clear of it. And this meeting is not the part of the environmental review. That'll be another step. We'll have to restart the environmental process that we started 2 years ago, but that will be after some discussion with the community. So with that, I'm going to give a quick overview of the report, and then Norm's going to go into the details. Most of the report that is out that we have now is the same as the report in 2017. Alternatives 1, 2, and 3 are basically the same, are the same. 4, the wastewater recycling is the same. We just kind of renamed it. And then there's a new 5th one. So the first alternative is the mill project. That's every person responsible for having a properly operating and functioning septic system on their property. That's the way it's supposed to be. It's not happening. A lot of people have done some. Other people have not. So alternative 1 is no project. The no project is usually for CEQA purposes. Alternative 2 would be an upgrade that everybody had to upgrade to make sure that their system is an operating system. And that would include the formation of a special district, which would oversee the inspection of those systems. And so that's if everybody wanted to maintain their own on-site system. So that's alternative 2. And that's the same alternative 1 and 2 that was in the 2011 report. Alternative 3 is also the same. It's expanded a little bit. Alternative 3 is what we call the leach field option, and that means that people would keep their on-site tank. Many people would have to upgrade that tank to make sure it's watertight. The waste from those tanks would then be collected and sent to a pretreatment unit, and then we go to a community leach field. So it's the same septic tank leach field system, but it's a community leach field, and that would be up off of railroad, fire road. Alternative 4 is what I call the golf course alternative, and that was the previously preferred alternative, which was designed for the maximum amount of water to irrigate a golf course. And that would, people would abandon their on-site septic system. There's a process for doing that. You don't have to do anything, somebody abandons the system and then connect to a community wastewater system, a collection system which goes to a treatment unit at the golf course, and then the water would be stored in these surface ponds. Those of you that looked at the 2017 remember the ponds. The ponds would be a part of Alternative 4. And the water would be used to irrigate a golf course. The new Alternative 5 is what I call the Greenbelt alternative, and that's similar to 4, meaning that people would abandon their on-site systems. There would be community collection of the waste, and it would go to the golf course property, but it would go up at a site to be determined up on the golf course, the clubhouse parcel. And the water from there would be either used for irrigation for any number of purposes on that property. It could be for a golf course. It could be a lesser amount of water than for Alternative 4, but it could still be used for a golf course. It could be used to maintain a park, for habitat restoration. It could be used for open space, irrigation of the country club area. It could be used for fire protection. It could be used for a fire station. So it lends itself to just about any use of that property. So that's the new Alternative 5. And of those of you that were familiar with the 2017 report that we had out, there was an Alternative 6, which was an expanded version that included French Ranch. We dropped that. We got the message clear on that, so we dropped that alternative. So that's not in the current study. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Norm, who's going to go into a little more detail and explaining what each of those mean, but I wanted to give an overview. And I also really want to thank Questa for hanging in here on this. This has gone way beyond their timeline and amount of time that they've spent on this. So I really appreciate them hanging with us and getting this report today. Thank you.
Such a good job giving you an overview and walking you through. I think it was a good presentation that I can, my presentation can be a little shorter and we can kind of cut to the part of the matter. So she was talking about the alternatives. So, we, after the time has passed and the county came to us and said, okay, we don't have the golf course. What else can be done? And so we grew, we had to consider what are the boundaries of what we can look at. And so the focus of the additional alternative, this is Alternative 5, was the clubhouse parcel and not the other, front and back line, which were being thought of as restoration or open space or some uses that would not be the focus of a wastewater treatment facility. So what we did is we looked at the clubhouse parcel, which is I think 20 some odd acres. And so the first thing was to examine it for where some potential sites would be to locate a treatment facility. So the water would be collected from, we had under this Alternative 5, we had three different levels. One was just Woodacre, that's 5A. Okay, and we actually figured we could scale that up to all 250 parcels that were in the Woodacre service area. Then Alternative 5B would take some percentage, some portion of San Bronco, some portion of Woodacre, as we had done in the prior study, totally about 270. So that maybe 75% of the people in those two service areas would connect. That was kind of the assumption. And then the third was what if all 360 from the two areas, that's our 100%. So that's 5C. So, and looking at the clubhouse parcel, you can see it. Go to the next. Okay, so these, yeah. Okay, so, yeah, go on. And this is going going back through some of the prior
Which
stuff.
way you want me to go?
Yeah, let's,
This way?
keep moving forward.
I'm going wrong way.
Sorry. Keep going through that. Okay. Just, well, let's stop back there. Okay, so before we talk about the clubhouse parcel and how a treatment system and the other facilities would be placed and how they would function on that parcel, this was the alternative 4. So from 2 years ago, when we presented the draft report, we had a treatment facility located on the golf course property near the maintenance facility, in the maintenance area. And that's what you see here in red. Okay, so that remains an alternative 4. And potentially could also be maybe matched with alternative 5 as a treatment facility location. But just to so we have a clear idea of what the golf course alternative was in the school part of the report. That would be the treatment facility, and then from there, the water would go to the holding ponds and then be integrated into the golf course irrigation system. Okay. Okay, and this was in that report from before, how it would all fit, what kind of tanks and sizes of treatment facilities and buildings and so forth. Okay.
You just want to point out that the green are underground?
Yeah. So in this end, as well as the slide for the clubhouse parcel, so this is an underground tank, buried tank. There's a buried tank, and that up above with dark green is also a buried facility. The main treatment unit is here, about 40 feet long, 8 feet wide, about 10 feet high. This would be a building, basically a one-story building. This is like a dumpster facility and a control building.
Can we ask questions?
Okay, yeah.
Where will this be in relationship to the clubhouse itself?
Okay, that's what we're getting to. Okay. So now we're looking at the clubhouse, and so this is the alternatives 5, A, B, and C. Okay, so we're zeroing in collection for the 5A would be just collection from Woodacre, and 5B and C from a portion of both the 2 areas. So up here we have 3 potential locations for the treatment facility. Okay, and we have a diagram of how it might look in one of those areas. But we didn't pick one over the other, not knowing what potentially could be done with the property. But we saw 3 locations that had enough size. So the first one we looked at was right in the middle, we call option B, and that's the upper level of parking. So if that parking area were taken out and it's screened by some trees and it's the farthest from the street, that might be, so that's one option. The other 2 options, one was up near the crossover to the back 9, so kind of that back part of the, on the little bit of a hillside near the back side of the clubhouse, and the other is down near the community garden. Okay, so coming in a little closer, so here are those 3 sites. Near the community garden, the upper parking area, and then back up in this back side of the clubhouse. So so those are the potential treatment sites, treatment facility sites, okay? And it would be similar to what we had laid out and showed here for the golf course property. It would be a combination of buried tanks, and it would actually be more buried tanks for this alternative 5 because we don't have the holding ponds, the open holding ponds that were part of alternative 4. So during the winter time, the water would be treated to the tertiary level, actually year-round. So this is recycled quality water. In the wintertime, instead of going to the holding ponds, there'd be some temporary tank storage, but the main dispersal of the water would be to subsurface drip fields in this area of this is hole number 1 on the golf course, the rough area, and then hole number 9. And so there's about 3 to 3.5 acres there. And we estimated for 3 different levels of service for 250, 270, 360 parcels that you require somewhere between like 1.8 to 2.5 acres of area to spread and disperse, and subsurface drift dispersal, which is something used on a residential level, but it's also used for commercial and larger facilities. So that would be taking recycled water whenever the weather was such, wintertime for sure, that you couldn't spray irrigate. You would go to the subsurface drip, like your dispersal. This is where the existing leach field is for the clubhouse. It's been there since, I guess, 1965. And this area here had been explored and tested back in 2004, 2005 for some changes at the golf course. And so there was some soils and test results there. And we also did some amount of constant soils work ourselves and reviewed the soil survey. This is actually falls in the band of some of the best soils on the golf course. So this is a pretty good area for subsurface dispersal, stretching across hole number 1 and the rough area. During the summertime, or whenever the conditions are right for irrigation, the rest of the clubhouse parcel would be available for spray irrigation, existing landscaping, turf areas, anything, any sort of landscaping that would be part of the eventual uses and development of the clubhouse parcel. That same water could be used as well on other parts of the front or back 9 parcels for any kind of, Maureen mentioned some of the potential uses, but it could be for construction water, which could be used on an ongoing basis for environmental restoration, irrigating redwood trees that might thrive on the golf course irrigation are in danger now. So there are a lot of different uses that could be made, but that would be seasonal, because you can't have any runoff of treated water even at the tertiary level. So, any questions? There'd have to be setback here. There's a culvert, and then of course the drainage through the golf course. So the design of the drip field would be following county and regional water board procedures, and the irrigation system would just be matched to the needs of the property. Yes?
Your previous slide had indicated an emergency storage tank, and your report mentions a worst case scenario of about 60,000 gallons per day based on the 5C. How many days total storage would that be at the 60,000 gallons were, say, power to go out and the plant to not be able to operate?
Okay, let's see, maybe, let's maybe just back up to the, back one up. So you're talking about this?
Yes, the emergency storage.
Okay, so this was for the golf course with ponds. So the storage tank is required by the Title 22 to be a 100% of the peak daily flow.
So it's 1 day.
So it would be 1 day. There would be backup generator. As far as storage, that would be the storage requirement.
Thank you.
Okay, so here I mentioned that we had laid out a similar array of tanks and treatment units and so forth to scale to see an overlay of the one of the areas. This was Site C on the clubhouse parcel, showing, and this is just one way to lay out the facilities. It hasn't gone through any fine tuning and back and forth, but here again, we have underground tanks, and we have more tanks in this alternative than we had for the golf course, but there we have the ponds to go with the treated water. but again, building, treatment unit, sludge, dumpster, the same biofilter, odor, and emergency generator. And here what we have is, for this one we have up to, well, this would be the 60,000, there'd be another 60,000 gallons of storage as part of the dispersal, the irrigation and the subsurface drip irrigation system. And that's to regulate the water during the day or from day to day during the irrigation season. The drip dispersal tank should say you get into a period in the spring and you start irrigating and you have to stop for an unseasonal rain event, you would switch back and go to the drip field during that period of time. So that's the way this would operate with, without any storage beyond these tanks, but you'd have the drip field for your dispersion. Let's see, in this, we've shown kind of shading here, an idea of a covering over the treatment units, because it is compatible with that, and maybe the, we'll go to another, now we're getting into, I think we should go down till we get the, okay, so this is what a treatment, a tertiary package treatment unit, which we felt was really the best for the size of the facility here. And it's a limited amount of space is required, but it's a treatment methodology which is accepted by the state for their requirements. And it's compatible, next slide, with covering. And what we wouldn't propose is a completely enclosed building that requires all sorts of ventilation, but more of a shell that would allow airflow through it. We have a separate odor control system that would be associated with the facilities. But this is just, again, just kind of a rendering that's to I think, perhaps satisfy people who want to put, want to screen, and I think in the locations on the clubhouse property, this would make sense. But the design of that.
What is the size of that?
So this is 40 feet long. This one looks like it's probably 60 feet long by 30 feet wide, or something like that. So something in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 3,000 square foot structure. Could be barn-like. It could be integrated with a control building to. So I think it's an area for design ideas and regular process. Let's back up to the look at some of the costs. So let's see, back up. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is kind of the comprehensive listing of all of the alternatives. And we've got, these are the properties that are served here. This is $1 million, the total project cost. That's the capital cost to build it, including all the engineering, all the permitting, and environmental work. This is in this column, you have your average cost per parcel. So that's this total divided by the number of parcels served. And then the other columns here, these two columns here, are the annual operation and maintenance costs, and then also carry out what would be the homeowner cost on an annual basis for connection to and service by the wastewater facility. So alternative 5, A, B, and C, compared with, this was alternative 4C from the 2 years ago. The golf course with the alternative with the ponds was $39,800 per parcel. The costs are less by a couple of $1,000s per parcel for the our alternative 5 without holding ponds, but with the drip dispersal system. So there's some reduction there, but as we estimated, the cost for operation and maintenance would be greater. And probably the explanation for that is that using the drip dispersal system for the winter period, that would be an obligation of the wastewater facility to operate and maintain, as opposed to giving the water to the golf course for their dispersal and their irrigation operations. That's probably the main difference there.
Do those numbers incorporate the potential grant funding for clean water and also recycled water to reduce the cost per parcel?
No.
Or is this just
So
all
these are just the gross cost to build, permit, and implement the project.
How about the cost of paying the golf course to use their properties to install this stuff? How is that going to be worked out with the future golf course owner?
Right. So in the discussions we've had with the golf course before, they invited the ponds to be located on the front and back nine. They also invited the location of the treatment plant there, with the understanding that they would, have all the water to defray their costs. And that was, we had kind of done our separate kind of, does that make sense? Is someone getting, a better deal or not? It seemed to, from the calculations we did as far as like what's the impact of having a wastewater treatment plant on your property, and it seemed like that was probably a fair compromise, but no deal was struck. It was just like, this seems like they were willing to look at that, so we assumed no cost for land acquisition, and we made the same assumption for alternative 5.
So you don't know the new owners will agree to this, but you're assuming that the new owner of the golf course will take the water as a trade for the use of the property.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
On your capital costs per parcel, are those including the cost of hooking up each individual property?
Okay, they include, yes, they include the lateral to each parcel. What they don't include is the property owner's responsibility to bring their plumbing to the street, so and to abandon their septic tank. So those could be $1,500 to $3,000 per parcel.
Yeah, dependent.
Yeah. Yes.
Would there be any additional costs to homeowners who want to hook up to the system beyond whatever it costs them to bring a line to the street?
Well, I think that was that they would have to abandon whatever their existing tank. So that involves a permit process with the county, and the typical process is you get the tank pumped out, and then a contractor will backfill, collapse the lid, or punch holes in the tank, and that's a typical abandonment. But that can be a few $1,000s to do that.
Okay. On top of that, does it cost anything to join up to the system? Because people might have the option to either do it or not. And I was wondering whether it would cost more to join into this program or to maintain my septic and possibly upgrade it. I just wanted to be able to know how those costs would stack up under those two options.
Right. Okay. So and I'll just use Marshall as the example because we have that experience there, and I can kind of tell you how that process went. So they formed an assessment district. Okay. So the assessment district was for the purposes of securing a bond or a loan for the first phase and a bond for the second phase to pay for the amount of the capital cost here that wasn't paid for by grants that they received, okay? And then each property owner, they didn't get a bill for $39,000 or $37,000. That assessment went onto their taxes, and so they're paying out over 20 years their cost through this assessment proceedings that they voted for. Okay, so the same type of approach, I think, would be proposed here, and the assessment district would cover all the properties that wanted to be part of the project. Okay, and so if you looked at that and said, you know, it looks like this alternative, maybe it isn't 5C, but maybe it's 5B, because we only have 75% of the people interested. That would be, you know, a cost of, you know, $43,900. So depending upon what grants, there would be some amount that, you know, that you could look at as, okay, if I join in, this is the assessment that I'll have to pay over so many years.
It's usually 20 year.
Pardon?
It's about 20 year is what the
Yeah.
assessment
Yeah.
is. We pay up all the ones,
Alternatively,
yeah.
depending upon what your own situation is, if you're in dire need of doing something with your septic system, then you have to kind of, it kind of really depends on your property and your, you know, the condition and what you've got with your septic system. You could be looking at the cost. We looked at an average cost being somewhere around $53,000. By the time you figure in all the construction work, and all the permits and the engineering and so forth. And I think we show for a no project that the costs out there are ranging from $35,000 to $70,000. So, but you could be at we looked at in the process of doing our alternative 2. We looked at the condition of a lot of the properties, the permit records, and so forth. Saw that there are some, like maybe 15% have very little that's needed, and maybe another 10% that, you know, have maybe a moderate level, but about 70 or 75% were in the category of needing some fairly substantial upgrade.
One of the objections has been that this serves a part of the San Geronimo Valley, but it doesn't take care of the whole San Geronimo Valley from Lagunitas to Woodacre. It's setting up a sewer system for part of the valley. This may be a naive question, but there's an old tunnel, little train tunnel through the connects from Woodacre to Fairfax. What would be the cost per parcel to connect to the sewer system for the rest of Marin if you include all of the San Geronimo Valley?
Well, I don't know. I think that idea came up in the early years of working on with the Woodacre community. There's a big cost to the collection system. I mean, if you look at the cost summaries for, and maybe, could you go down slides here and see another, I think we have to go down 2 more. Here, okay. So for this project, you can see up at the top, the biggest costs, the line item costs are the collection system for both Woodacre and San Geronimo. So those costs are still, and if you're considering more of the valley, it doesn't necessarily get cheaper. You just continue to have to collect at the same rate. But if I don't know anything about the tunnel, I have to say, but if someone has more information, I think that's possibly something that can be raised in the EIR to know whether or not that's something that has any viability at all.
If you go back to the other chart, what's the difference between the 210 and the 250? And I guess just the numbers of the 75%.
Right, okay. So yeah, the difference between so when we looked at the just serving water on the golf course, we define that as only one pond on the front 9 and not going to the back 9 as a simple, that's how the project first started. And so this is limited to 210 based upon the storage capacity for the pond on the front 9. When we came to using subsurface drip, we had enough capacity in the fields there, in the open area on the clubhouse parcel, to run this up to the full 250 parcels in Woodacre. That's why we have a difference there. The others, we just assume 75% and 100%.
So 75%, I'm just not, maybe I'm just not getting around correctly. The 270 is an additional 20 parcels? Is the first 75?
Yeah, well, okay, so this was just, there's no sand and rock, just Woodacre's coming into a treatment plant, and what would that, so that's how we defined this first one, just a Woodacre project. Then we said, well, what if we bring the two together? What if it's just 75% from Woodacre and 75% from San Ramo, or 100% from both?
It's not
So it
75%
isn't
of
just-
San Francisco.
Yeah.
One of the big objectives of the wastewater group has been to try and also think about ways to make this project financially feasible. And we were inspired by the Marshall community, where they were able to bring their costs, the construction costs, down by half. So property owners ended up paying $22,000 instead of approximately $44,000. And I wonder, Maureen or Norm, if you could talk a little bit about what chances there are of grant funding or loans for this project.
I'll start. So the pot of money that we had from Marshall was clean water, and that would have been something we would have looked at for the leach field alternative. There's no money available for that project. There is funding. I'm encouraged by the recycling grant program that we got funding to do the feasibility study. They're set up like you can do feasibility study, it looks good, and you can get funding for the engineering design, and then hopefully get funding then for the construction. So I think with the recycling, there's Prop 1 money for that. The state's looking at multi-purpose projects. They're not doing the single-purpose projects anymore. So if they're looking at a project that cleans up the wastewater and cuts down the use of raw water, they're more inclined to fund it. So I'm optimistic that there could be funding for recycling alternatives.
At what level? 50% or?
I don't know. I don't know. In Marshall, we had a 50%. So instead of a $40,000 project, it's $20,000 per parcel. So it could be significant, particularly since there's the engineering, design, and things like that. Which, you know, if you don't have the funding to start getting into some of the details and figure out what the assessments are going to be, it's hard to get kick-started. But if you have some funding to do the engineering design, you can get going.
Norm, did I hear you correctly a moment ago? Did you indicate that the Trust for Public Land, that there's who's the existing owner of the golf course, there's a memorandum of understanding with them? Is that the case?
No, I think I said quite clearly at the beginning that we're uncertain as to what's going to happen with that property, but
There was a question from the audience, and it sounded like he had said that the current owners have agreed. So.
No, I think it's referring to the Lee family. When we worked with the Lee family originally,
Yeah.
they were the ones.
We had multiple meetings with them and discussed these things. We didn't get down to negotiations, but they said, if we're doing this, we can work it out. So we're assuming that something similar is possible.
This goes back to operation. I'm confused by the 5A option, the recycling. So in the, 5A or C. So in that scenario, in the wintertime, you would be doing subsurface
Drip dispersed, right.
Okay. And in the summertime, you would be doing overhead?
Yeah, summertime it would be, free to be irrigated to the landscaping at the golf course, turf.
So why would you do overhead in the summertime? I mean, could you do the drip dispersal in the summertime also?
You could. There's a an obviously better use of the water for landscaping around the facility, and that's why we assumed that. So you would probably then have to upsize the drip field so that you could operate it year-round. It would normally be.
So the overhead would be a more elaborate system than
Yeah. So we've costed out, we estimated about 6.5 acres, 7 acres, and 9 acres of turf or other landscaping. And there's that much that's currently irrigated on them.
On the assumption, one last question, on the assumption you didn't need that much irrigation, you could certainly do the drip dispersal in the summertime, correct?
You could continue to use it, or you could take it on and off. Yeah, sure. Yes.
Couple of questions. One is, if there's an assessment district and then we divide those costs over 20 years, it's those costs divided by 20, but plus about how much, like in Marshall, like how much more is it because it's a bond that is, it's a low interest rate. It doesn't.
Yeah, it was a 2 to 3%.
Oh, great. And then my other question is, if there's, if the power goes out, there's some emergency here, whatever, the power goes out, what happens to all of the wastewater that is being generated by our companies?
Okay, so there would be a automatic generator at the treatment facility that's required for a tertiary facility like that, as well as the service to Woodacre includes one main lift station there, and that would also have emergency power there. So so that would kick in to keep the processes going, right, and all the pumps.
That exists in all sewer systems, right? All sewer systems have to have.
Yeah, they do. There's occasional one that has a gravity system, but for the most part, there are pumps in virtually all sewer systems.
The question was for me, and the pressurized system in the San Geronimo part is what I've seen. If the power fails, what gets the wastewater out of my property? Where does it go? I know there's a generator at the end,
Right.
but does that continue the pressurization process so it leaves my property and continues to go to the tertiary plant?
No, that wouldn't. So the way we did it in Marshall, because they also have they have septic tanks and the pumps. So they're all designed and built with the capability for portable, for a transfer switch and portable operation with the generator. Okay.
But what does it have?
No. And that's how the pressure, the granite pump pressure sewer system would operate. So there's a certain amount of storage capacity in the granite pump basin, and then there's a throw switch, and the provision in the operation and maintenance program would be for the operator of the facility to operate those pumps as needed during an extended power outage.
So the homeowner wouldn't have to have a pump on each piece of property?
No. I mean, they'd have their granite pump, but they wouldn't be operating it would be the maintenance personnel that would have to make the rounds. That's the way. And like I said, we have that system in place in Marshall, but it's never been used.
I thought we had said, or you had said, that we were supposed to, we were going to get rid of our tanks and break them up.
Yeah.
So if we don't, so we have to create another storage area in case of an emergency?
Yeah. So in the San Geronimo portion and parts of Woodacre, the Redwood section there. So the grinder pump is like a polyethylene basin, about 3-foot diameter, 30-inch diameter, about 5 feet, and so that is the pump basin that replaces, your septic tank goes away, your plumbing goes into this, and then this connects with a small diameter pipe the collection of lines in the street. So
Is
that's
that,
it.
are the costs of that installation part of this,
Yes,
money?
yes.
It's all.
Except, again, like I mentioned, the abandonment of the tank and then refilling that.
Well, you're now talking about personnel. Now, does that mean this has to be staffed year round by a number of people? You have to have pickup trucks and things for them to drive around and take the systems with? And we got all of the maintenance costs of hiring essential employees. Is that calculated in any?
Yes, yes, it is.
And then Marshall is done by a contractor, right?
Yes, the Marshall system has that. They have a contract operator that visits the facility and has remote, and much smaller.
Somebody's paying them.
But yeah, so,
That's
yeah.
24
we-
hours. What is the quality of the water in ponds? Both I'm thinking about what the smell, but also for wildlife. What is the quality of the water?
In this alternative, alternative four. Yeah, so that would be the tertiary quality water. So we've gone through the membrane bioreactor, UV disinfection, and that's the water that would go for storage in this alternative. So it's tertiary water, which is, meets the highest standard.
Yeah, so I understand that the ultimate goal is contamination, basically, to clean up the waters, the local water. And I understand the kind of money-wise, they're pretty much comparable. What would be your, did you estimate, I think you have the kind of estimation logistically, if you would compare the alternative 2, 4, and 5, to implement basically any of those alternatives, how would you compare those alternatives? How easy timelines? How easy to implement, let's say, alternative 2 versus 4, 5, from the perspective of the county, you would say, logistically, how much time it would take, how logistically is complicated these different alternatives. Basically, how much time?
Yeah, I don't know that there's really that much, beyond getting the approvals and the design in place, I think the construction of either of these alternatives would be fairly similar. And it could be about maybe an 18-month or 12 months to 18 months construction period to do that. The implementing the on-site program would probably take a lot longer, because they would be individually assessed, designed, and so that would probably be.
So logistically, it's the most complicated kind of alternative.
Yeah. So this is a little bit more time-consuming to implement. It may be easier to approve if the community agreed to that, because you're not dealing with any off-site.
No, I'm saying the final result,
Yeah.
basically, so that we have these upgraded alternative 2 or already built systems and alternative 4 and 5. Okay, yeah, I see.
Yeah, so an example of alternative 2 is, in the county, Stinson Beach is they've been operating since 1977 in the county with a program where the water district out there is responsible for inspecting and overseeing, and there was a long period of time of upgrading of septic systems, and it goes on. So, but that's an example. If someone wants to look into that here.
We have here 9 different alternatives, and but 4, A, B, and C, and 5, A, B, and C are the ones that are preferable, best.
Yeah.
how, is this gonna be held to a vote for the people to pick? I want A, B, C, 4, or whatever. Or how is the will of the community, the individuals of the community, gonna be counted to know which one is the people want? Is this gonna be a vote, or who's gonna decide which of the alternatives is gonna be chosen?
Yeah, so I think, and maybe Ring can follow up with more details on the environmental impact study that has to be conducted. Because that would be the next step to really bore in on the, there's some information in our report, but not the level of detail that we need to make that decision. But that's the purpose of the environmental impact report, is to shine more light on what is proposed and what are the alternatives. And out of that, it gets you closer to presumably some consensus on that.
And once that's reached, once all the studies are done, at that point, the community's going to be asked which one they want.
I think hopefully before then we'll have a direction on what the community would have a preferred alternative. But once, actually on any of those, once we decide what that option is, the formal assessment district goes to the vote. It's a vote.
So it's a vote?
Yeah. There's,
And to be clear, it's a vote of the property owner.
the property owners in the
Of the
district area.
specific property owners in that area.
Yeah. And I think there was 2 steps for Marshall where we set up a zone which was without a vote. It was basically a protest hearing. The Board of Supervisors held a hearing on this protest. And there weren't any in that case, and so the zone was formed. But then when they formed the assessment district, it was a vote by each parcel up there.
You have 360 homes as your maximum. Those are existing homes, they're not new constructions, new homes, or anything like that. And your capacity is at 100% at the 360.
Yeah.
So the big fear about this creating a whole new development situation, I heard, it's not 100% correct.
That's correct, yes. It's not been conceived of as a project capacity. I think there was discussion of maybe some community facilities being added in, but yeah, no, it's not for developing new parcels. In the back.
Yeah, that being said, in the 2017 report, I remember seeing something to the effect that the system could be built with additional capacity in it so that if there were further interest in the future, it could be scaled up perhaps at the time, the 2017 report, it was all about the ponds. So you might be limited in your capacity by the size of the ponds. But in alternative 5, could you simply just subterraneanly irrigate more area and then slap on another treatment module if you wanted to scale up the system and then extend more sewer lines or add new ones? Is that possible in principle?
Yeah, in principle it is. I think we identified what we thought were really good soils and approximate acreage, but that's not to say that there might, a lot of the golf course has been, the land's been worked over the years and it may not, measure up, but there's a lot of land, in the combined acreage of the golf course that there potentially is more that could be developed.
And if it continued to be a golf course, since you're only proposing to supply 20 or 30% of their needs under, with the current proposal, that if they were scaled up and they wanted to use more water, there would be more water for them to use, presumably, right? So although you haven't considered this above 360, it's possible in principle to scale it up quite a bit more, isn't it?
How much, I don't know, but yes, I think that it could be scaled up.
Thank you.
Wouldn't it follow that if you did scale it up, that the more connections, the lower the cost per connection would be?
how much, it would tend towards a lower, the economy scale and the cost per parcel would go down. That's what these numbers show for 250, 270, 260, that there is savings. So I can't tell you how much, but it would tend in that direction.
In response to that, you wouldn't affect the initial assessment with future development. They're not going to refund the part of what we paid when it was limited to those numbers, so we just go on from there. In other words, you would have to plan for additional, and the assessments would be based on what foreman. The future development doesn't change what we can happen.
Yeah, so a typical sewer project doesn't put constraints on, they have vacant parcels as well as developed parcels. And so all the parcels get they pay the same amount, and some people are going to build in the future, okay? So, but if it's defined as, well, this is going to be for these service areas, and if there's capacity and additional going to be added in the future, maybe that's a second assessment. In fact, that's what was done in Marshall. There was a phase 1 assessment, and then several years later, when the funding was there to do the second phase, they had a separate assessment for the second phase. So that would be.
And then my original question was, let's say it's a 12-month construction process. Does that mean you would say, let's just say right in the 4 sections, starting closest to the golf course, get that done first and operational, then do the second and tie that in and go essentially upstream for each of those? Or you do the entire system first and then make it operational?
It could be phased. You could say, let's do Woodacre first, or San Geronimo first, but you really have to do the treatment and the disposal, and that has to be done first. And then you kind of branch out, so you can move upstream, to bring up your
facilities in place and operating. So that would also give you the opportunity to evaluate how well it's functioning, so we can tie this in.
To some degree, yeah, sure.
Do you want to finish your presentation and then maybe get 1 or 2 more questions and finish your presentation? And then does that work okay?
Yeah.
We're talking about dispersal of post-treatment tertiary water. Is there any post-treatment solid waste that has to be disposed of? And if so, how is that handled?
Okay, so there is, I've got actually a photo of some of the equipment for that. But yeah, so from the membrane bioreactor system, there is sludge that is secondary solids, is what it's called. That is, so actually here's a picture of the facility. This is called a sludge bagging system. Okay, but it works well for us. This is a really small facility as wastewater systems go. And so this would be in some kind of a structure, and maybe a couple of times a week, the operators would direct sludge to be pumped, and it spreads, and it actually fills these bags, and then the water drains out, the water goes back into the system. Those are allowed to drain, and then about on a monthly basis, those are hauled to a landfill. So
Those are trucked, are they trucked out?
yes, they're trucked.
Has the environmental impact of trucking out sludge been accounted for in any EIR?
Well, that would certainly be an issue in the EIR coming out. Okay, let's see.
There's a question over there. Well, I think we wanted to finish the presentation.
Maybe back up. I'll just to highlight, this already. Okay. So this is the question was about the operation and maintenance. Okay, so we have at the top you see the labor accounted for half time or a third time. The requires a recycling, a wastewater treatment certified operators, a facility like this, but there's also technicians and laborers. But these are all in the report, how we, came up also with our estimated electric costs, and this is a big aspect of the system, both for pumping the water through the facility as well as the operation of the treatment systems. UV disinfection, and then accounting for the treated water distribution. So, yeah, next. This is, exactly. So this is kind of what we've talked about a little bit here in some of the questions, kind of where do we go from here. So you need this project report to lay out, here's the apparent best alternative and the other alternatives. So that's what the environmental impact report will address. There has to be the agreement with the owners of the property as they develop a better idea of what the future holds for the golf course property. Governance, so this is forming then a district. This is this is different from the assessment district. There's assessment district is a financing district. The wastewater operating district is probably a county service area or what was done in Marshall was called an on-site wastewater management district. But an on-site wastewater management district can manage treatment facilities and collection systems as well. But this would likely be under the governance of the County Board of Supervisors. But and part of the report, one of the appendices of the report, it talks about the different ways that you can govern an on-site or a wastewater facility. But that movement has to be made there, and then you get to the assessment district and finding the financing. And you don't go to an assessment district until you have a really well-defined project. You have a really good enough design work done so you know that this is really what the costs are going to be. Because once you have an assessment vote, you can't raise more money through that assessment. You have to go back and run through the assessment again if the costs go up or there's something that changed in the project. So you want to have a real good handle on the cost before you go to the vote and for the assessment. And then there would be ordinances, and then the permit in here would be through the regional water board, and that's called the division for the water recycling unit of the state water resources control board. And then the county for water board. Let's see, I threw in. Okay, I just threw this in because I know I don't know if can anyone recognize what that is? This is Tiburon Caprice Restaurant. This is the sewage treatment facility for Tiburon, right here. And next, this is looking at it from ground level. And then next, this is a view from the plant. It's a kind of magnificent view they have there. This is right in the Tiburon, and most people are unaware of it. It's the whole Tiburon Peninsula, Sanitary District 5. So, yeah.
That's not in relationship to what we're talking
No, no. It's just like there are ways. Oh, yeah. Wait. Yeah, you would probably have just a little sliver of what that is. But a lot of communities have to deal with.
Any idea what their monthly or annual property?
It's probably high, Tiburon. I don't know. It's something.
Could be lower though because there's so many.
Yeah.
I can answer a little bit because I've looked carefully at it. The prices throughout Marin County for hookups to sewer systems range at the low end in Novato, something like $540 a month, to Larkspur, which is over $1,300. So most of them are in the
$40 a month.
We're in the same ballpark.
So, we're going to continue with the questions. I just want to make a couple of comments before we open up all the questions, because people have asked two questions in particular. Would do a community system, is it mandatory? The only alternative that would really be mandatory would be alternative 2, and that could be expanded, although our numbers don't reflect expanding to larger areas, that could be expanded down. Otherwise, alternatives 3, 4, and 5 typically would be, if you have an operating system, it's fine, you wouldn't have to join. That's what we did in Marshall. If you have an operating permit, you don't need to connect. As long as your system is working and operating, okay. Probably due to a repair standard. Those details will be worked out in the formation ordinance. The other question is the change in the community character. People question that. And in Marshall, we put a cap on what the development could be. And that project only serves existing properties. It does not serve vacant lots. The growth-inducing impact is addressed in the secret document, the standard. I imagine we will propose some self-mitigating measure. The growth-inducing impact could be the same whether it's alternative 3, 4, or 5. So it's the same issue with either of those alternatives. There's no difference. We could propose a maximum of 500 square foot or up to the median home size, whichever is larger. That's one way people can manage changing the community character. That's part of another discussion, but there are ways to minimize and having no impact on the community character. And again, it could be, I think all along we've been looking at this to serve existing problems and not vacant lots. So that, any other questions? Pardon? Okay. So now, any other questions? I just want to add that before we open it up.
I think this would be directed towards the county. You had mentioned that the homeowners would end up taking on 2 expenses of their own properties. One of them was demolishing the septic tank, the one they were abandoning. But I think the county should be considering letting people maintain those tanks. This project, if it goes through, is already going to remove water from the watershed in the winter months, and that's one of the leading causes of fish mortality in the creek. But having those tanks available, also allows people to possibly run their, rain gutters into them or collect water from other areas. And best management practices already, in some cases, mandate homeowners create drainage swales or create collection ponds. And so, I think that you kind of get a bonus out of that if those homeowners who have that can hook those up rather than being, pushed into, covering the cost of demolition.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
What's driving this whole project? I know we have a problem, that's obvious, but I've never seen any sort of enforcement other than when a home is sold, that you have to have bring up the code.
Actually, the county doesn't require that. It's something we've talked about, but that's not a requirement. It's a good practice for anybody purchasing a home. But right now, the main trigger is, and Becky may want to add to this, is when people remodel their home. That's assuming they get a permit. So that's the only chance we really have to inspect systems. And some counties or some areas, they have annual inspections, or they check on systems. Our only opportunity is when people upgrade their home, or if they have a problem and they need to fix it. But we just don't have the staffing to inspect and make sure everybody has all the systems working. That's why alternative 2 would be able to allow people to have their systems on site, maintain their own system. The key is people need to maintain their systems, and we don't always see that.
So there's really nothing legally driving this.
The county is obligated to make sure there's no discharges into the bay.
But we already have bad water in the summer.
Did I answer?
Yes.
Well, maybe you don't live on the flats, do you not?
I do.
Well, I guess what really got it started are those of us who live on the flats who are constantly aware that our leach lines are going into water-filled land and that we're polluting, and we don't want to. We don't want to be polluters. That's,
Sure.
And also just the complication of your system working well when it's inundated with water. That's a problem. So it's homeowners knowing that there's a problem.
But it
That's
seems,
what- it's voluntary, it's something we want
Yeah.
to do.
yeah, no, I understand that.
And it's a lot
And I
cheaper
support it, but
to do.
I know that there are people who do nothing.
Well,
They
if you
have failed
ever wanna
systems
get a
completely and
permit-
they do nothing.
If you ever want to get a permit to do any kind of improvement on your home, your
Yeah.
septic system better work, or you won't get it.
Okay.
I think it's worth it to add that in addition to being motivated ourselves to do the right thing and in the belief that by working together we might do better, there is regulatory pressure coming through what's called the local area management plan. So the state level and then at the regional level have been pressuring the county to be stricter about systems, in particular higher risk systems that are in proximity to creeks or other water bodies. And so there are proposed regulations on the books being reviewed by the regional board right now. Local area management plan is the term, or LAMP. So you hear people talking about a LAMP. And it proposes regulation, basically higher standards for systems within 200 feet of the creek, as well as inspections of those systems on a more frequent basis. So we kind of are anticipating as a community as well as the government a rising bar. And so the motivation is to try and work together to do better.
Okay.
In anticipation of that.
So just to give a little history on this, I think that in the study it's mentioned the preponderance of clayey soil in this valley.
Speak up.
That it's mentioned the preponderance of clayey soil, meaning soil that doesn't perk, and that is one of the main reasons why the Woodacre Flats, which was originally developed with very small parcels in the 60s, that maybe met standards at that point. They don't meet the standards of these now. You know, those standards have been upgraded, and so that's what has really the density of the population and the fact that the soil doesn't perk, which is essential to a septic system. That is really what has brought us all here.
I was wondering, there are a lot of areas outside the flats with a significant number of developed parcels. And I was wondering whether there's anything in this study about contribution of these other areas to the matter and whatnot that's been found in the creeks. And if you don't know, why was that not included in the study? Why, if this is expandable, why not cover all of these other areas? Why just cover the flats? I mean, there are all these houses that are already built.
Right.
Development issue.
We tried to expand the project and everybody got upset. Not everybody did. But I think we started with the flats because that's where the community was interested and they wanted to do something that was a pressing need there. So we started with them and then it expanded because people were interested. We've said all along that we're happy to work with people further downstream if they're interested. And maybe, you know, if this works out well and there's more energy and community to do more, we could put a similar unit at another location to serve more properties in the valley. It certainly can be expandable. We started with where the community interest was. We're building on that.
It seems like you're kind of just following on that. It seems like you got all the flats and those are identified. And once, if that was all completed and these surrounding buildings wanted to join in, I understand that it's expandable, but what would be the process of expanding if those other developed properties wanted to join? Would they be locked out, I guess is my question.
Are you talking about homes on the hillside or further down on the flats? Because the
No.
homes on the hillside is a different cost for transmitting, the collection system.
Well, they're laterals to get from the hillside down to the flat. I understand that being a different cost. But I'm concerned about, I'm wondering about whether they would be foreclosed because they weren't in the study, they weren't part of the environmental work that's being done, they weren't part of the sizing of the plant, or any of the other details. So would they be locked out basically from connecting?
Well, they wouldn't, if we're talking about Woodacre.
Yeah,
So the sewer system and the pipes are of a size that can easily take more connections, okay? So you're gonna put in, whether it's just 6-inch or most of it's gonna be 8-inch through the railroad area. So you could physically take in more properties. And maybe, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I think that's possibly something that could come up, as an alternative or recommended point to be addressed in the EIR. What about, this or that additional area beyond Woodacre?
I was actually thinking about the EIR, because the EIR, you have to be specific as to the number of connections you're going to have. If you're going to say it's 360, and that's the boundary, then if another 200 people around the hills want to join, then what?
It wasn't covered.
It wasn't covered in the EIR, and the plant wasn't sized, and the pipes went not be in.
It's like the Marshall project, where you take on a second phase. Second phase of the Marshall project had to do its own environmental review and get its own funding, and then came in as an addition to the zone.
Although in the Marshall project, we anticipated other connections in the EIR so that we didn't have to repeat the EIR. So we had phase 1 and phase 2, even though we just had a facility plan for phase 1 at that time.
Well, that would be a good solution if you were still doing that.
Yeah. I think some of it means that the community was interested in that, there's enough interest in the community for that.
There's a project in Canada a while back, I think it was in Vancouver, I believe the architects for RBH building sizes, where they have no, they recognize that, like this project, they wanted to use the recyclable water for irrigation, but they also did it they used the sewage to generate energy, so they have no energy coming in and no trucking of sewage out. They're just using the solid waste to produce energy, so they have to pay for electricity. That also subsidized, instead of the apartment owners having to pay for electricity or natural gas, their energy was paid for when they bought into this project. I wonder if you've looked at RDA sciences, building sciences, or projects that combine energy generation from the sewage along with the recycling water.
We haven't in the work we've done so far.
These are usually larger scale projects.
Well, that's the nice thing about taking the whole valley into consideration, then you have enough components to do it.
In 2003, I got a permit from the county to put in an alternative system called a chroma glass. It's now called a chroma flow, and they make them from 500 gallons a day to 650,000 gallons a day. I put mine in 2003 and realized last year, my goodness, I haven't had it pumped in a long time. So I called a pumping company to come, and I have no solids. It's an aeration system, and it aerates, and then it settles out, and then it's pumped out into my old leach field. I actually have a geoflow in my lawn, and it pumps out and waters my lawn. It's an amazing system. I've had no problems with it at all. Is there some way, since it goes to 650 gallons a day, is there some way we could do something like this to serve the entire valley? It just seems to me, it's underground, it's quiet, there's no smell. It's kind of an amazing system. It's called ChromaFlow.
Yeah, it's one of probably many aerobic treatment systems, and you have a residential model.
I have a 1,200 gallon tank.
Yeah.
And it's been in since 2003. I've had no problems. I've not even checked it for a long time, but it's going great.
Yeah, so if an alternative, say, treatment technology, you wanted to look at that. What we looked at here was something that would meet the state standards for recycling water, and they're fairly strict. They don't tell you, what manufactured system, but they tell you what the process has to be. So with that kind of system, you'd actually need another filter, but.
Well, it says that it's used all over the world, and it actually says that you can treat seawater and turn it into potable water with the system. I mean, I don't know that that's true of my system, but it seems to me that if you could find a system that serves 650,000 gallons a day, we would treat the entire valley and eliminate all of the whatever, put the effluent, if it's clean enough, right into the creeks to water our fish.
Yeah, that's usually what you come up against, where the water is going to go, which is really driven. It's not so much the treatment process itself, and the chromatograph may be something to consider before all is said and done, but where that water goes is very tightly regulated, and it has to be conform with the state requirements and help with the water quality standards, as well as make sense for the properties where it's going. But, thank you.
It's certainly something to explore.
I once calculated that there are probably about 1,500 septic systems in the valley. And your biggest alternative here, assuming you can find somebody who will buy that golf course property and keep it a golf course / sewer plant, will cover about 25% of those. So that means that we're still going to be putting pollutants into the creek. We're still going to have a valley-wide problem, even if you flawlessly implement your most aggressive alternative. I've been reading these reports for probably 10 years. This has got to be the 6th meeting I've been to. I'm wondering when the county is going to reach out to the rest of the valley, to the people who want to clean up their on-site systems. I think you said, Maureen, that if people come to you, you will, or maybe you said this, Lisa, if people come to you, you will restore them. I'm wondering if the county will take a leadership role and reach out to people and help them find acceptable on-site systems, even for problem areas, which Liz says there are such systems. When will the county stop focusing 100% on this kind of a system and start looking at on-site systems that would clean up our creek throughout the valley and take that kind of leadership role? I keep waiting for it to happen, and I've asked this question, I think, in every meeting I've been to, and I'm glad Supervisor Rizzoni is here because I'm hoping that the county could kind of reorient away from this huge complex, which, as complex as it is, you need grade 3 operators to do it, but they're all part-time people. And I'm wondering who's going to sit on the wastewater board and want to be responsible for running a system like this with part-time people. I'm wondering if we can't start, if we started looking at on-site systems 10 years ago and spent the kind of money we spent here, we could have 20 systems functioning now that are functioning poorly. We could have 20 great systems. A long question, I know, but it's one that I really am trying to get an answer to, and I'm hoping to get one before I leave tonight.
Are you wondering about efforts to deal with better on-site
I think
system
that an
or
on-site
other
system,
clusters of.
an on-site system could cover, on-site systems could cover the whole valley. It wouldn't require this complex structure. It wouldn't require a sewer line going across the creek. It wouldn't require somebody buying the golf course who wants to also run a sewer plant. It would get rid of so many of these logistical problems. It seems like a very elegant solution, and you could tackle the worst ones first.
But I think there are some things, and it's come up in some discussion, not just in Marin, but some other counties I've been working with, Alameda County, where they are trying to make better use of gray water systems as part of the way to deal with problematic loss, to take some of the load off the septic system, but to do it in a way. There is a state gray water code that actually can be used to help with septic system issues, but it hasn't been used, I think, to its full extent so far. But so that's probably the one thing that they start to come forward. You said something about there are areas that simply they can't get rid of the water on their land in the wintertime because of the clay soils and the high groundwater. They have to go elsewhere with that's kind of the basis of a collection, a community system, whether it's fire, road, leach field, or the golf course area. But there are many properties in the valley that can't, they can't, even with chromium glass or gray water systems or sewers, can't treat all of their wastewater on their site. So I think there's probably a hybrid or a mix of solutions in there. But
are there 360 of those problem systems that would require a golf course, or are there 36 of those systems that would require something a lot smaller?
Well, I don't know the exact. There are we found probably in the random the survey we did of some representative numbers, about 12 to 15% were in the category of in good shape or up to code, or so we know that, but we felt that there were about 70% that were we're going to need a major upgrade to the septic system for our alternative 2 or some off-site riveting.
But we don't know how many.
Oh, we don't know exactly.
It seems to me that you would be arguing for alternative 2. We should have everybody upgrades their.
I'm not arguing for anything. I'd like to see the intense amount of information put forward on those kinds of solutions as have been done on this one, which is now becoming really problematic if we've got to find somebody A to buy a golf course and B to run a sewer plant. That's going to be tough. To find somebody like that, I'm saying, can't we simultaneously be looking at these on-site solutions? Why does it have to be a big central system that we're only looking at that?
We are definitely looking at alternative 2, which provides for on-site systems and uses all of the high technology options under community management. And that's an example that could be expanded to the entire valley. But the realities of the costs and the fact that many of us live in places where we're either forced into mounds or sand filters, big boxes in their backyards, we decided as a community group that we wanted to look at other alternatives. And in particular, we decided to focus where the risk is highest, the density of homes, the clay soils, the age of systems, and so on. So really, what you're advocating for is one of the alternatives in effect. So,
and I don't know how many people are here from Forest Hills and logging units, but I'd love to see those people brought into the discussion and have a chance to say, hey, what about me? I don't want to do it.
We're available as a community group to work with any of our neighbors who want to look at systems for other areas. And the answer is if you look at what's cost effective, and in some places up on the hills, maybe it is more cost effective to do on-site, whereas on the valley floor, where you have a high density of homes, maybe it's more cost effective to do a community system of some kind. That's been kind of the premise we've been operating under.
but definitely the goal is to try and help as many people in the community as we can. Happy to keep talking with you after the meeting.
Yeah. To build on to this thread of conversation. So in addition to, to build on Lisa's answer, in addition to there being economies of scale with a community solution for places where the soil doesn't hurt, there's also, as it were, free money available for recycling the water because there's Prop 1 funds that apply to that, so there's an incentive to look in that direction as well. But I want, when you think about what a properly perking septic system does, is it's putting water into the ground that actually does feed the creeks. And so maybe arguably, if those systems worked well enough, then, and were implemented at a large scale, then arguably those are a reuse of water that's supplying an environmental need in a location where salmon frequently don't have enough water in the summer. Maybe there's a way to pitch this for grant application purposes. If you're looking valley-wide at a solution, for the places that do perk, maybe there's some kind of, if you thought of a comprehensive program that had a non-perking part that applies to the Woodacre Flats, and a perking part that applies to most of the other areas, and pitched some huge grant proposal that got money for the whole damn thing, maybe we could get it all covered with free money. I mean, has anybody thought of trying?
I've been keeping an eye out for funding for a while, and I haven't done it, but I'm open to any suggestions if you hear of anything.
Well, I'm not likely to see it because I don't know where to look, but someone who does know where to look or know who to talk to could maybe sort of start pitching it or floating the idea until somebody starts scratching their head in a positive way about it.
Hi. Did I hear that mountain systems will work on Woodacre Flats?
In parts of it, they will, yeah. Not everywhere.
They wouldn't work on all the land?
Not everywhere, no.
So where is the pump in Woodacre and how much noise does that make? And also, are there any plans for catastrophic emergencies like earthquakes, like if there's a big something happening up on Fire Road, like what happens to all that water or stuff that's sitting in Woodacre or sort of, because there aren't going to be people able to get into the valley to perform that maintenance, and who knows what happens.
So the first question was about the pump station. And so the identified location, of course, this would be detailed in the EIR, the kind of question of noise and odors and people coming and going and so forth. But a typical lift station is a basin or vault, concrete vault below grade with submersible pumps. So you might hear a hum of the motors or the on and off switching of the motor, but it's not like you'd hear a lawnmower sound or anything like that. There would be, from time to time, you'd have an emergency generator that has to be run to just keep it, as part of checking it out and servicing it.
And where would that be?
That would be a subgrade. So that would be the biggest noise at a lift station would be the maybe a few times a year, maybe monthly, run the emergency generator just to see that it's operating. Or if there is an extended outage, it would operate. That would be the noise to run the pump, which is submersible. Otherwise, you wouldn't have any real noise. But yeah, so your other question was about the leach field, and I think the geological challenges of that site would be addressed in the EIR. There are, if it's a pipeline that breaks, there would be shut-off valves, and there can also be, where you've got creek crossings and things, you oftentimes have the ability to span that with a portable fire, basically large fire hoses, what East Bay Mud uses throughout the East Bay for pipeline breaks. But those would be some of the things, but probably doesn't answer all your.
About the creek crossings, that's about.
Yeah, so there's a creek crossing from Woodacre to come out to Francis Creek, which is the preferred route, and that would be the pipeline would be in the road above the concrete culvert there, so it wouldn't be exposed anywhere. There's another bridge down by Meadow Way, and for some homes or some of the collection lines that would cross there, and that would be a double sleeved. So you have the pipeline inside another pipeline that is a continuous span of that attached to the bridge. I don't think anyone has looked exactly at the details of that, and that would be an application of shut-off valves and a bypass mechanism for any movement of the bridge that affected that.
Yeah, I see it's about 5 to 9. I think we're probably kind of winding down. I have a couple comments I want to make. Thank you for the presentation and let us know what you're up to here. I've got a letter from the Regional Water Quality Control Board in reference to the notice of preparation for the Woodacre Flats Wastewater Recycling Program in 2017. And the first issue they address, they're concerned about the term project area being unclear. But more importantly, they say this appears to leave out some on-site wastewater treatment systems unserved by the proposed project. The EIR also needs to clearly describe what measures will be taken to address inadequate systems in the area that will not be served by the project. Now, I haven't heard, we've talked about it before, we brought it up, but I haven't really heard or seen anything in the new report dealing with systems other than this proposed project. And it sounds like it's something that's going to need to be dealt with. And then the Regional Water Quality Control Board also felt that the Operation and Maintenance Program did not appear to have program staffing or financing to support this program. So they felt you were adequate in those two areas also. So as we progress, I'd like to give you that information, which you have, I assume. And I'm assuming we'll hear more about those two things as things go on. Specifically, serving areas outside the project area.
I think that was in reference to the scope of the EIR, and those will be addressed in the EIR.
Okay, I haven't heard anything talk about it tonight, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, the EIR is on hold right now, and we'll soon the
Sure.
EIR.
Yeah. But it's something you're going to have to address in the plan. Okay.
Maybe one or two last questions, and I'll wrap it up.
Possibly we would say this, is there a clear next step on this, or are we in limbo while waiting for that for the document?
I think there's, the way I view this document as a planning tool, a point to restart our conversation. We were moving forward with a project in CEQA. Now we're going to have a chance to regroup with this new information, sit with it a bit, and I think we need a conversation with the community and see, do we want to wait, see what's going to happen with the golf course, or are we going to move forward with another alternative? So I think this is a document to restart that conversation, as well as a document that the property owners of the golf course will be able to look at and use in their planning process as well. So next step, we welcome an opportunity to meet with smaller groups. I think that would be the way to go, maybe planning a working group. But once we get this report now, we're kind of pushing to get that done in some other projects. We hopefully can work with you all to figure out where you want to go from here.
So the new EIR can't really be started yet at this point, is that right?
Well, we can, it's hard to, we can't really start an EIR on anything on a golf course property because there's litigation right now. So I think we'd have to wait 12 months for that, 18 months before we know. So it's a tough call, and that's where I think it's a whole other conversation, the pros and cons of moving forward with another alternative versus recycling versus the benefits of waiting for future funding. So that's a whole other conversation that I think will follow up on this. And we're running through as many people as possible, obviously, now.
So this rolls into what you just sorry for that. I understand it's a very fluid situation. But, do you have any idea what we're looking at, the timeline? Is this a 10-year project? Is this 5 years? I know we don't know, what the starting point is going to be, but I have no sense of how long this is going to go on. Or,
It's a good question. We lost a couple of years here. One of the slides that Norm had out was the steps that it would take, and we kind of estimated a timeline on that. We have it in the full report, but it seems like 5 years. It'd be nice if we could get going in 5 years. It depends on how quickly things progress on the golf course in terms of planning, and if we could get funding for that. Otherwise, if we go for beach alternatives, we could proceed on that, start the CEQA. We may flame out trying to find funding. So it's a discussion that we need to see, but I can't see anything happening before 5 years. And in the meantime, we do have a policy for working with, communities like Woodacre Flats, where there's a possibility of a community system where we can work with you in terms of upgrading to maintain your system as best you can in this interrelated time. And with
Where can we find the planning document online to get things environmental health?
Yes, the easiest thing to do is to Google Woodacre San John wastewater project. But where it is on the Environmental Services website, there's a special projects up in the right-hand corner, and you click on that, and there's a whole page for this project with this background documents that include this report, executive summary. And if you can't find that, I can give you my card and you can email me and send you a link. But I want to thank everybody for coming. This is a restart of the conversation. Stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.